In this video, we're going to be breaking down why this hero is actually secretly one of the best characters to climb ranked in the entire game right now, and it's Doomfist. And I know that you generally hear that Doomfist is a bad pick, even from notorious Doom mains. Not only is Doomfist, in my opinion, one of the most fun characters you can play in Overwatch, but he's actually incredibly strong at climbing in ranked for three major reasons. The first one is that he is the best at hard carrying. I recently did a tier list talking about some of the characters that can carry the hardest in Overwatch, and Doomfist was near the top and was the #1 tank at hard carrying. The reason for this is because of your mobility, the capability of you to burst down targets, and the fact that you can chain CC enemies over and over again can make you feel like an unstoppable monster in the right hands, and you have the capability to legitimately 1v2, 1v3, and pull off some crazy wins all by yourself. And I would say that if you are better or best in the lobby and you're good at Doomfist is one of those characters that you make your opponents look silly. And this is what you often see when you see some of the top Doomfists. You see their montages, you see their play, and they're making even really great players look silly because they are better than those players and they're showcasing it through their skill on Doom. So while some tanks, you might be really better and it comes in the form of little tiny decisions over the course of a round. Maybe you're like a god Orisa, but you don't really seem like you're just deadlifting a game. If you're better at Doom, it's apparent and you're just completely carrying your team. Now, the second reason that Doomfist is actually incredibly powerful right now, especially in ranked, is that he has 0 bad tank matchups. And the thing that you often hear about tanks right now, or just playing tanks in general, is oftentimes it relies on like a rock, paper, scissors. There's characters that are generally good against others. People play Ryan against Zarya, and then Orisa against Ryan, and then Zarya against Orisa, and people play this like rock, paper, scissors thing a lot, and everyone's always swapping to play whatever tank is better in the matchup, and the game becomes kind of stale when people are just counter-picking each other over and over again on the tanking side. But when we look at Doomfist, he doesn't really have any truly bad matchups. I would say his worst 2 matchups are undoubtedly Orisa and Zarya. Both of these characters you can 100% play around, and even if they do have an advantage in these matchups, it's really slight. And one of the main ways that these 2 tanks shut down a Doom is by playing incredibly passively, either with their bubbles or their cooldowns, like Orisa will tunnel vision you really hard. And if they're doing that, they're not hard carrying their team, they're just shutting you down. And if you play passively as well, now it's kind of like a wash, and you can find specific moments to go in and still be proactive. But at worst, Doomfist feels like an even matchup, and at best, you don't feel like you ever have a bad matchup in the tanking category, which is such a huge deal. As opposed to you being a main in a number of different tanks, it really feels like not only can they set up situations where you're at a huge disadvantage, but it also just feels like you can't do anything in some matchups and you have to swap, and swapping to a tank you don't normally play can be really frustrating. So this is another reason why Doomfist is so powerful right now. And the third thing that you got to understand about Doom is that Doom has true flexibility in his playstyle. A lot of people think that Doomfist has one playstyle, and that's really why they suffer. They think that, hey, they either have to dive in and they go all in with their cooldowns and try to kill like a Zen in the backline, or they get a power punch and they try to punch someone and get a kill, or chain punch like 5 people. But the thing about Doomfist is he is incredibly fluid with the type of playstyle that you can whip out depending on the tank matchup, depending on the enemy team, and depending on what you need to do to give value. So as an example, let's say the enemy team is playing a really dive heavy composition. They're going freaking soldier, they're going tracer, they're going ball, and maybe like a Kiriko Lucio, right? And these characters are like flying around and they're trying to dive your team. You're like, oh, it's really hard to get a punch off on Doomfist. It's really hard to get charge punch on Doomfist. So you're like, oh, I can't play Doom into this. But you actually can, because Doomfist is incredible at being disruptive. He can chain slam a lot of these people, messing up their engages. He can just boop the ball non-stop. He can play a really peel and passive version of the character to disrupt, and through that disruption create advantage for his team. Now, let's say they're instead playing a composition like with a ton of CC. They have a Sigma, they have an Ana, they have a Cassidy, and just a lot of damage as well. And generally, you're like, okay, how do I play Doom into that? Well, this composition is going to get you Power Punch. You're going to get it really easily. You're going to be able to bait it, or maybe you don't even have to bait it. You get Power Punch, and now you're going to get these either one pickoffs randomly in the middle of the fight because you see an Ana out of nowhere that's out of position, and you just pivot and kill that Ana, like, it doesn't even matter. Or you're getting these huge chain punches, and these huge chain punches are building you up ults very quickly. So then you get a charge punch. You go all in with the charge punch, typically using shift and punch at the same time to just slam them into a wall, ulting, slamming, doing it again because you get another charge punch, and you could just deadlift an entire team fight off the back of that. And these are just two of the playstyles, but there's a million other playstyles. Ramatra's walking in, Ryan's walking in. You can boop them away indefinitely. They can't do anything to you. You literally can peel and be passive and shut down enemy tanks. You can be aggressive and jump on enemies and get your charge punch and just solo kill enemy teams or enemy players. Now, it's not always going to be perfect. There are times when Doomfist is bad, but they don't center around the things that I mentioned. The first thing is there are counters for Doomfist, but they actually don't exist really in the tanking category. They exist more in the supports or the DPS category. So the big counters that you're kind of frustrated with mainly are like fly characters, primarily Far Mercy is really annoying. I mean, a lot of tanks can't do anything about that. And then Sombra, which is kind of like a counter to all tanks, but especially mobility heavy tanks, it can be really frustrating to play against a Sombra. First off, the benefits to playing against the Far Mercy is primarily if a damage boosted rocket hits your power block, you get your power punch immediately, as opposed to if you're shot without damage boost, it gets you to like 90%. So you're gonna be able to get that power punch pretty simply from Pharos. A lot of Pharos just shoot you and they think that it doesn't matter, but it does matter because getting that power punch, boom, you have a power punch. Now you can go kill that second support that doesn't have peel because the Mercy's up in the sky. Now, the other thing, Sombra, you typically have to play really passive, but I would say that this is the most hard counter out of any character that probably exists, primarily because if the Sombra wants to make it so you can't be aggressive ever, she can do that. Now, you can still play a passive Doom, but it's not going to be a carry Doom, and it's going to be a bit frustrating. And then next up, we do got to talk about follow-up, because Doom wants people that can capitalize on his follow-up, and not every team composition is going to be able to do this the same way. Like, as an example, if you're playing Doom with, like, double sniper, or maybe you're playing Doom with 2 hit scans that are playing near your supports really far back, and you're chain punching the enemy team over and over again, and you're baiting out Suzus and baiting out nades, it can be frustrating when you feel like there should be some follow-up. If there was a Genji in there, or a Sombra, or a Tracer in there, they could go nuts, but you don't have that. Now, this doesn't mean that Doomfist is all of a sudden terrible. It just means that you need to not try to play for that and rely on that nearly as much. And the majority of the time, you need to do softer engages or more isolated engages where you're trying to pick and choose your targets instead of just trying to mass punch a whole bunch of people and hope there's follow-up. But of course, if you get your ultimate, then you could definitely hard commit a lot more, get power punch, all in commit, ults, then slam in, and then you could typically get something done with all of that value that you're generating. Now, the last thing that you need to understand about Doom is that there are some maps that he does struggle with. Primarily, Circuit Royale and Havana are frustrating ones. Widowmaker maps, long distance maps. The problem is Doom wants to have walls to slam people into. He doesn't really want to play against snipers that are playing super far away because he can't dive nearly that deep. And of course, those maps are kind of dominated by Sigma at the highest level. Now, of course, you can still get Doom to work, especially if you have dive DPS, but for the most part, those maps are going to be fairly difficult to make work, except like Circuit Royale on 3rd is perfectly fine, and then Havana, I think through 2nd is perfectly fine, but the last point, the first point, a bit rough. Now, this isn't really an in-depth guide on Doom. For that, I definitely suggest Spylos that he did with Chipsa, or I suggest Quake Dawn if you want a more advanced level and you're already like to Masters Plus. Quake Dawn definitely has a really in-depth one. But overall, I want to shine a light to this character that I think is not only incredibly fun, but actually really dominant right now. And I think that especially for ranked, he might be one of the hardest carry characters that you can play. But yeah, Blizzard, this doesn't mean don't buff my main. Please buff Doomfist. But yeah, thank you so much for coming by. Please smash the like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you next time.